What's a social habit everyone seems to accept but you find really annoying? It's really frustrating when people don't realize that the key to a good conversation is actually listening. It seems like they're just waiting for their turn to talk, instead of really paying attention to what the other person is saying. This lack of listening can lead to misunderstandings and makes the conversation feel one-sided, like the other person doesn't really care about what you have to say. It's like they're more focused on their own thoughts than on truly connecting with the person they're speaking to. It's really annoying when people feel the need to record every single moment of their lives. Some experiences are meant to be lived in the moment, not captured on a screen. It feels like they're more concerned with showing off on social media than actually enjoying what's happening around them. It really irritates me when people gather right in doorways, especially when there's so much space elsewhere. It's like they don't realize they're blocking everyone else who needs to pass through. This habit can cause unnecessary congestion and makes it difficult for others to move around freely. It feels inconsiderate, as if they're unaware or simply don't care about how their actions affect those around them. People who stop in the middle of a busy walkway to check their phones. It's like they think they've hit pause on the world. When I'm trying to enjoy a meal at a restaurant, it's incredibly disruptive to hear kids blaring their TV shows on iPads. It's not that they shouldn't watch their shows, but it's hard to understand why they aren't taught to use headphones. The loud noise ruins the atmosphere and makes it difficult to have a conversation or simply relax. It feels like a lack of consideration for the people around them, turning what should be a pleasant dining experience into something stressful and annoying. The pressure to always be reachable through social media, texts, or calls at all hours can be overwhelming. It's frustrating that if you choose to take a break from this constant connectivity, people often view it as strange or antisocial. The expectation that you should be available 24/7 can make it hard to find personal time to disconnect and recharge. It feels like there's no room for setting boundaries without being judged, turning what should be a personal choice into a source of social pressure. It's really unsettling when people film strangers, especially when it's done intentionally to create content for the internet. Taking a casual photo with people in the background is one thing, but deliberately pointing a camera at someone without their consent crosses a line. Even if it's legal in most public spaces, it doesn't make it any less invasive or disrespectful. The idea that someone's private moment can be turned into online entertainment without their permission is troubling and makes public spaces feel less safe and more intrusive. When someone blasts terrible music from their phone speakers in public, it's incredibly annoying. It's as if they assume everyone else shares their taste, or maybe they just don't care. This lack of consideration disrupts the environment, forcing everyone around to listen whether they want to or not. Instead of enjoying a peaceful moment or your own thoughts, you're subjected to noise that no one asked for. It's a selfish habit that turns public spaces into personal concert venues, often at the expense of everyone else's comfort. Being on your phone while having an in-person conversation with someone, like "Hello, I'm right here, not in your screen." It bothers me when people find it acceptable to stare at their phones while spending time with a friend or acquaintance. It feels like a lack of respect, as if they're more interested in their screens than in the person right in front of them. This behavior can make the other person feel unimportant, as though their presence doesn't really matter. It's a small action, but it speaks volumes about how much, or how little, someone values the time they're spending with you. It's curious how at work, leaving early often goes unnoticed, but arriving just a few minutes late can stir up trouble. This double standard seems to highlight an odd societal norm where punctuality is strictly enforced, but the end of the workday is more flexible. It's almost like starting the day on time is seen as more important than how it ends, even though both impact productivity. This discrepancy can feel unfair, especially when a few minutes of lateness are treated more harshly than leaving early. People who talk loudly on speakerphone in public places. It's infuriating when people spread out and take up more space than they need, especially when there's no real reason for it. They act as if the world revolves around them, leaving others to navigate around their unnecessary sprawl. This kind of behavior feels inconsiderate, as if they're oblivious to the fact that others might need room too. It's like they're marking territory in a way that's both selfish and annoying, making public spaces feel more cramped than they actually are. It really gets under my skin when people toss their cigarette butts on the ground. I enjoy a cigarette now and then, and don't mind the smell. But the way some smokers treat the environment is disgusting. Instead of disposing of their trash properly, they just litter everywhere without a second thought. It's not just careless, it's disrespectful to the community and the environment. Seeing cigarette butts scattered around makes public spaces look dirty, and it's frustrating to know that this habit is so common among smokers. It's exhausting how everything on the internet seems to be met with negativity these days. A new movie releases. People immediately tear it apart. A song drops. It's instantly labeled as terrible. Even when someone shares something as simple as cooking, there's always someone ready to criticize. Celebrities have a bad moment, and suddenly there are calls for their careers to be over. It feels like the internet is drowning in negativity, where nothing can be celebrated without someone trying to tear it down. And if you actually like something, there's always someone ready to make you feel bad about it, as if enjoying anything is a crime. People that don't use their turn signals. Edit. I know it's a duh type of thing, but I just want to make it clear that it's something that bothers me. It really bothers me when someone brings extra people to a meal without asking first, especially if I don't know them. It changes the entire dynamic of the gathering, making it awkward or uncomfortable. Instead of a relaxed, familiar environment, it suddenly feels like you have to entertain strangers. It's not just inconsiderate, but it also puts unnecessary pressure on everyone involved, especially the host. A simple heads up could make all the difference, but when that doesn't happen, it can turn what should be an enjoyable experience into something stressful. How are you? Good. You? Good. Good. Networking feels like a tiresome charade to me. It's a game where everyone's trying to be noticed and admired, putting on a facade just to get ahead. The idea of attending events purely to remind people of your existence, hoping that one day, out of all the fleeting interactions, someone will remember you and offer an opportunity, seems pointless. It turns human connections into transactions, stripping away any genuine interaction in favor of self-promotion. Instead of building real relationships, it feels like you're just another face in a sea of people, all vying for attention. It's incredibly frustrating when groups of people take up the entire sidewalk and don't even bother to make space when they see you coming. It's like they're completely oblivious or just don't care that others need to get by. Having to step off the sidewalk and onto the road just to keep moving is not only annoying, but also potentially dangerous. This lack of basic courtesy is all too common, and it makes you wonder why some people can't just be a little more aware and considerate of others. The phone is not an electronic leash, and it's frustrating when people expect immediate responses. If I don't pick up your call, just leave a voicemail. If you text, I'll reply when it's convenient for me. You're not the only person in my life, and unless you're family or someone incredibly close, you're not at the top of my priority list. I'll get back to you, but on my terms. This expectation that we have to be instantly available all the time is unrealistic and needs to change. Everyone should have the right to manage their own time without the pressure to respond immediately. It's unsettling how normalized excessive drinking has become. As a recovering alcoholic, I now see how the culture around alcohol can enable those with a problem to convince themselves they're just having a good time. The widespread acceptance of heavy drinking creates an environment where it's easy for someone with a serious issue to go unnoticed. People don't often call it out because it's so ingrained in social settings. For those who really need help, this can be harmful, as the signs of a deeper problem might be overlooked or dismissed. It's not that everyone who drinks has an issue, but for those who do, the casual acceptance of over-drinking can make it harder to recognize and address their struggles. Asking quiet people, "Why are you so quiet? Speak more." If I answer, "Why are you so loud? Speak less," I am the asshole. Put your fucking shopping carts in the right spot after using it. It's really draining when someone constantly unloads all their problems on you without ever showing interest in what you're going through. I know someone like this. They seem completely incapable of discussing anything other than their own issues. Conversations with them always revolve around their problems, leaving no room for anyone else to share or even feel heard. It's as if your role in the relationship is just to listen and support, while they never reciprocate. This kind of one-sided dynamic can be exhausting and makes you feel like your feelings and experiences don't matter. QR code menus at restaurants are incredibly frustrating. It's ridiculous to have to scroll through my phone just to see what's on the menu. There's something off-putting about being forced to use technology for something as simple as ordering food. Plus, it just encourages everyone to keep their phones out for the entire meal, which ruins the atmosphere. Instead of enjoying the company and the dining experience, you end up staring at a screen, and it feels like a step backward in terms of personal interaction. I can't stand how people suddenly started using speakerphone for conversations in public. It's like we went from having private phone calls to broadcasting everything for the world to hear. The noise is annoying and it's intrusive to everyone around. What happened to just holding the phone to your ear like before? It's as if some people forget that not everyone wants to hear their conversations. It's a small change, but it's incredibly irritating and makes public spaces feel a lot less private. It's infuriating when people crowd around the baggage carousel at the airport, acting like they're the only ones who need to get their bags. They block everyone else, making it nearly impossible to see or reach your own luggage. This kind of behavior is so selfish and inconsiderate, as if they have no awareness that others are waiting too. It turns what should be a quick and straightforward process into a frustrating experience, all because some people can't think beyond their own needs. Bringing your fucking dog everywhere, including in stores. And I freaking love dogs, but come on, don't just assume they can come to social gatherings. It's really frustrating when someone is late all the time. It shows a lack of respect for other people's time and makes it difficult to rely on them. Whether it's a casual hangout or something more important, constantly being late disrupts plans and creates unnecessary stress. It feels like they don't value the effort others make to be punctual, and it can make you question how much they really care about the commitment. Punctuality might seem like a small thing, but when someone is habitually late, it sends a clear message that their time is more important than yours. It's really annoying when people show up to work sick. No one wants to deal with your germs, so just stay home. It's not about being tough, it's about being considerate. You're not just risking your own health, but everyone else's too. And honestly, you're not going to be at your best anyway, so what's the point? Keep your illness to yourself and let everyone else stay healthy. It's so frustrating when people stand way too close in line, packed together like sardines. Cramming in like that doesn't make the line move any faster. I really miss the days of the 6-foot personal bubble during COVID. It felt so much more comfortable. Being that close to strangers just feels unnecessary and uncomfortable. It's like everyone forgets about personal space and it makes waiting in line even more unpleasant than it already is. It's really problematic when people use psychological disorders to describe minor problems. It diminishes the experiences of those who genuinely struggle with these conditions. Saying things like, "I have anxiety," when you're just feeling a little nervous, or "I'm OCD because you like things tidy," undermines the reality of living with these disorders. It's not just casual language, it takes away from the seriousness of what people with these conditions actually go through. Using terms like psychotic to describe someone's anger is another example. It distorts the true meaning and impact of these words. It's really inconsiderate when people bring their pets, especially untrained or fake service dogs, into stores and restaurants. They don't seem to think about others who might be allergic or uncomfortable around animals. Legitimate service dogs are one thing. They're trained to be in those environments, but regular pets don't belong in these places. It's like some people believe the rules don't apply to them, and it creates unnecessary issues for everyone else. You don't see people carrying their cats around everywhere, so why should dogs be any different? It's about respecting shared spaces and the people who use them. As an autistic person, I totally get how frustrating it is when people say one thing but mean another, or when they imply something instead of being direct. I've had so many situations like that, especially with my mum. For example, she used to say something like, "The dishwasher's clean," and then get upset when I didn't empty it. Back then, I didn't realize she was asking me to do it. I just took her words at face value. It led to a lot of misunderstandings, which was tough. Now, she's learned to ask me directly, which makes things so much easier. Clear communication really makes a difference. Same answers every time this question is asked. Noisy phones, being late, slobs, etc. Not really answering the question. These aren't norms. These are inconsiderate people, LOL. Dinner party with 6 people. 5 of them are on their phones. Talking over each other is one of those things that happens far too often, and it's incredibly frustrating. Many people don't even realize when they're interrupting someone, and they just keep talking, completely oblivious. What's even more annoying is that this behavior often goes unchecked, as if it's just a normal part of conversation. It's a relief when others don't switch their attention to the interrupter and instead continue listening to the person who was originally speaking. But honestly, this habit happens so frequently that it feels like it's become accepted, even though it really shouldn't be. It's not just rude, it disrupts the flow of conversation and shows a lack of respect for the person who was speaking. It's hard to understand why some people feel the need to cry on social media. The idea of setting up a phone to record yourself while in the middle of a cry seems so strange to me. It feels like something that should be private, not broadcasted for everyone to see. The act of sharing such a vulnerable moment online, where it can be judged or even exploited, is baffling. It's almost as if the line between personal and public has blurred, making it hard to imagine doing something so intimate for the internet. Some people really just need to be told to be quiet. I've met way too many people who seem to like the sound of their own voice way too much. And the constantly dominating conversation seems to just be accepted by the people around them. It's incredibly frustrating. Where I live, the phrase "have a blessed day" has really caught on, and for some reason, it makes me cringe every time I hear it. It's not that I have anything against the sentiment, but there's just something about how it's used that feels overly saccharine or forced. It might be well-intentioned, but it often comes across as insincere or cliched. Instead of feeling genuine, it can feel like an automatic phrase people throw out without much thought. It's one of those things that, despite the good intentions behind it, just doesn't sit right with me. That little dance people do before accepting something is so unnecessary. If someone's offering me something and I want it, I don't see the point in playing this back and forth game. It's like a weird ritual where you have to pretend you don't want it or insist they don't have to, even though you're just going to accept it in the end. The whole thing feels like a waste of time and energy. If both parties know the outcome, why not just skip the theatrics and take what's being offered? It's so much simpler and more honest that way. Loud kids shouting and running everywhere, and parents don't give a damn about their kids. It's really frustrating when people at work assume I have no plans just because I don't have kids. It's like they expect me to always be the one to change my schedule because a parent wants to take their kid on a trip or handle some other personal thing. My time is just as valuable, and I have my own life and commitments. The assumption that I'm more flexible simply because I don't have children is unfair and dismissive. It's as if my plans don't count as much, which can be really annoying and disrespectful. Spitting on the ground, just no. Small talk is already something I could do without, but it's especially irritating during a transaction. I'm just trying to pay for my stuff, not engage in a forced conversation. The "how are you" and other pleasantries feel so unnecessary when we both know they're just for show. A simple hello and thank you are more than enough. We don't need to pretend to care about each other's day when all we're here to do is complete a purchase. It's not about being rude. It's about keeping things straightforward and efficient. What's something you only understand if you have lived it? Chronic pain. You've experienced pain before, so you think you get it, but nothing prepares you for when pain becomes your new baseline normal. Poverty. One thing that's hard to truly understand unless you've lived it is the experience of deep grief. Whether it's losing a loved one, going through a major life change, or dealing with any kind of profound loss, the emotions that come with it can be incredibly complex and overwhelming. The experience of deep grief is something that's nearly impossible to fully grasp unless you've lived through it. Whether it's the loss of someone you loved dearly, facing a major life transition, or enduring any kind of significant loss, the emotional impact is far more complicated and intense than words can describe. The weight of sorrow, the emptiness, and the confusion can consume you in ways that are difficult to explain to someone who hasn't gone through it. It's a deeply personal journey, filled with moments of darkness that only those who have walked that path can truly understand. Being in a war zone in any capacity. The mindfuckery of addiction. Having a child die. The reality of severe mental illness is something that's hard to fully comprehend unless you've experienced it firsthand. It can be incredibly debilitating and isolating, leaving you feeling trapped in your own mind with no way out. The loneliness that comes with it is profound, and it's baffling why mental illnesses are sometimes glamorized. There's nothing glamorous about the struggle, the pain, or the constant battle just to get through each day. It's a harsh reality that only those who have lived it can truly appreciate. Living with chronic illness or disability is something that can only be truly understood by those who experience it daily. It's not just about the physical challenges, but also the emotional and mental toll it takes. Every day can be a battle with pain, fatigue, and limitations that others might not see or understand. The frustration of wanting to do more but being held back by your own body is something that's hard to explain. It's a constant struggle, and the impact on your life is profound, affecting everything from your independence to your relationships. Only those who live with these conditions can really grasp what it's like. An abusive relationship is something you can't fully understand unless you've been in one. From the outside, it might seem simple, just leave. But when you're in it, the reality is far more complex. The struggle between what your mind knows is right and what your heart feels is incredibly difficult. It's not just about physical or emotional pain, it's the constant confusion, the fear, and the hope that things might change. The psychological hold an abuser can have over you is powerful, making it hard to break free even when you know you should. It's a situation that only those who have lived through can truly comprehend. The trauma of being sexually abused as a child is something that changes you forever, and it's impossible to fully understand unless you've been through it. The pain, confusion, and fear stay with you, shaping your life in ways that others can't see or comprehend. It's not just a memory. It's a wound that never really heals, affecting how you trust, how you feel about yourself, and how you interact with the world. It's a silent struggle, often carried alone, and the impact is something that only those who have lived it can truly grasp. Working in customer service is something you really have to experience to fully understand. The constant demands, dealing with difficult customers, and having to stay polite no matter what can be exhausting. It's not just about providing a service, it's about managing emotions, both yours and the customer's. The pressure to always be on, even when you're having a tough day, is something that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't been there. It teaches you patience, resilience, and sometimes it can feel like a thankless job. But it's a reality that those who have worked in customer service know all too well. As you age and your looks begin to fade, you start to notice that people don't pay as much attention to you anymore. It's a strange feeling, especially if you were once considered attractive and received a lot of attention for it. On one hand, it can be a relief not to be in the spotlight all the time, but on the other, it can be unsettling to feel like you're fading into the background. Developing a strong sense of self and a good sense of humor about it becomes essential. It's a shift that can catch you off guard, but it's something you come to terms with over time. Depression is one of those things that's hard to truly understand unless you've lived with it. Many people think it's something you can just shake off, but it's never that simple. It's not just feeling sad or having a bad day. It's a deep, persistent struggle that affects every aspect of your life. It's like carrying a heavy weight that you can't put down, no matter how much you want to. The idea that you can just get over it completely misses the reality of what living with depression is actually like. Grieving someone who is still alive is a unique kind of pain that's hard to explain unless you've been through it. It's like being frozen in time, mourning a person who's physically there but emotionally or mentally gone. The loss is real, even though they're still alive, and it creates a confusing and heartbreaking situation. You find yourself grieving for what once was, for the relationship or connection that's now lost, even as the person remains in your life. It's a painful, lingering grief that's difficult for others to understand unless they've experienced it themselves. What it's like to be actually poor, like where is my next meal coming from poor? Spending over 6 months in the hospital, waiting for multiple organ transplants, is an experience that most people can't even begin to imagine. It's not just about the physical pain or the uncertainty of your health. It's the mental and emotional toll that really gets to you. Sharing a room with others who are loud, inconsiderate, or just plain difficult to be around only adds to the stress. I remember one time, a woman's daughter yelled down the hall, accusing me of making a mess, when in reality it was just a container on the floor. That moment broke me, and I couldn't stop crying. They moved me to another room, but the damage was done. On the flip side, I got to know everyone, from the porters to the kitchen staff, and they tried to make things a bit more bearable. I did my best to be a good patient and not complain, but the whole experience was mentally crushing. I almost died a few times, and that fear never really leaves you. The hospital was near a children's ward, and seeing the kids outside playing was bittersweet. I spoke to a nurse about it, and she told me how some parents just couldn't handle it and left, never coming back for their kids. Hearing that broke something in me that I didn't even know could be broken. Cancer. Having a narcissistic parent is something that leaves deep, lasting scars, and it's hard to understand unless you've lived it. The constant need for control, the manipulation, and the way they make everything about themselves can make you feel like you don't matter. You grow up feeling like you're never good enough, constantly seeking their approval, even though it's never really about you. It's always about them. The emotional toll is immense, as you're made to believe that your feelings and needs are secondary, if they're acknowledged at all. It's a draining experience that shapes how you see yourself and how you relate to others, long after you've left their influence. Losing a parent or both, especially at an early age. Edit. I just want everyone to know I have read nearly every comment and have shed some tears. Y'all are not alone. I hope this was as therapeutic for you as it was for me. The feeling of being truly alone, even in a room full of people, is something that's hard to explain unless you've been there. It's not about physical isolation, but a deep, internal sense of disconnect. You're surrounded by conversations, laughter, and life, yet you feel invisible, as if no one really sees or understands you. It's a profound loneliness that goes beyond just being by yourself. It's about feeling utterly alone in your experience, no matter who's around. It's a feeling that stays with you, reminding you how isolation isn't just about being alone. It's about feeling alone, even when you're not. Panic attacks are something that's hard to fully comprehend unless you've experienced one yourself. The physical intensity is overwhelming. Your heart races, your chest tightens, and it feels like you can't breathe. It's terrifying, and what makes it worse is how the fear feeds on itself, turning into a vicious cycle. The more you panic, the more your body reacts, and it feels like you're losing control. The scariest part is when you start to feel like your mind is cracking, like you're on the verge of something breaking inside you. It's an experience that's hard to put into words, but it leaves a deep impact, making you dread the possibility of it happening again. Psychosis. Losing your partner, especially after decades together, is a pain that's hard for anyone else to truly understand unless they've been through it. When my husband of 30 years passed away after a long illness last year, I was overwhelmed by grief. What made it even harder was hearing people say, "I know how you feel," when they still had their partner by their side. It's infuriating because they can't possibly know that depth of loss. I'm managing, still working with a grief counsellor and moving forward as best as I can, but it's a journey that no one can fully grasp unless they've walked it themselves. Growing up with a parent who had untreated mental illness, especially when they seemed perfectly normal to others, was an experience that left a deep mark on me. To the outside world, my parent appeared fine, but behind closed doors, it was a different story. I watched them cycle through different personas due to DID, only to see them instantly switch to a calm and pleasant adult when the phone rang. It was surreal, almost like living with two different people. Looking back, it's clear how much that shaped my understanding of reality and trust. Being raised in a cult is an experience that completely alters your perception of what's normal. Even after leaving, I'm still uncovering things I once thought were perfectly ordinary, only to realize they were abusive, repressive, or downright unacceptable. It's a strange and unsettling process, having your entire universe flipped upside down once you finally wake up to the reality of it all. The hardest part is coming to terms with how deeply those beliefs were ingrained and how they continue to affect your life even after you've broken free. If I could go back, I'd tell myself to invest in that small tech company that was just getting off the ground. Fast forward 5 years, and I'd be reaping the benefits of that early leap of faith. Looking back, it's clear that sometimes taking a calculated risk is the best move you can make. Living with chronic illness or chronic pain is a daily battle that others often don't see. The constant comments like, "You don't look sick," or "Really, you're always in pain. Why don't you act like it then?" are frustrating and isolating. People don't realize the adjustments you have to make just to get through the day, things they take for granted. It's a constant mental and physical strain, balancing your limitations with the need to appear normal. The exhaustion isn't just from the pain itself, but from the never-ending need to explain and justify what you're going through. Migraine headaches are an entirely different beast from regular headaches. I've had some so intense that I genuinely didn't know how I was going to survive them. The pain becomes so overwhelming that even the slightest sound or the dimmest light feels like a knife to the brain. There have been times when I've had to leave social events or work because of a migraine, barely able to make it home, and panting like a dog just to cope with the pain. What's frustrating is how people who've never experienced a migraine often dismiss it, treating you like you're exaggerating. It's not just a headache, it's a debilitating experience that can leave you feeling completely helpless. The weight of true loneliness is something that's hard to describe until you've felt it. It's not just about being alone, but about feeling completely disconnected from everyone around you. It's a heaviness that sits on your chest, making even the simplest tasks feel overwhelming. You can be surrounded by people and still feel utterly isolated, as if no one really sees you or understands what you're going through. The silence of loneliness can be deafening, and the emptiness it brings is something that lingers, affecting every part of your life. It's a profound, aching void that only those who have experienced it can truly understand. Paralyzing fear. The suicide of someone you love is a pain that's indescribable and leaves you with a deep sense of loss and unanswered questions. It's a grief that's tangled with guilt, confusion, and the haunting thought of what you could have done differently. No matter how much time passes, the void remains, and the what-ifs never truly go away. Living with or witnessing paranoid delusions is another reality that's hard to convey. It's like being trapped in a world where your mind plays tricks on you and reality becomes distorted. The fear is constant, and the line between what's real and what isn't becomes blurred. It's exhausting mentally and emotionally, and the struggle to maintain a grip on reality is relentless. Both experiences leave deep scars that change you in ways you can't fully articulate to someone who hasn't been there. Never having a family of your own is a unique kind of loneliness that can be hard to explain. It's the absence of shared moments, the lack of a place where you truly belong. Holidays and milestones that others celebrate with loved ones can feel hollow, and there's a lingering sense of being on the outside looking in. You watch as friends build their lives around their families, and though you may find fulfillment in other ways, there's still an emptiness that's hard to fill. It's not just about being alone. It's about missing out on something that many take for granted, the comfort and connection of a family. Abuse leaves a mark that runs deep, shaping the way you see the world and yourself. It's not just the physical or emotional pain, but the lasting impact it has on your sense of self-worth and trust. The fear and shame can be overwhelming, making it hard to reach out or even admit what's happening. Over time, the abuse can warp your perception of reality, making you question what's normal and what isn't. The scars may not always be visible, but they affect every part of your life, from your relationships to how you navigate everyday situations. It's a heavy burden to carry, one that only those who've been through it can fully understand. Being poor is an experience that many people misunderstand. They think it's just a matter of working hard and saving up, but it's so much more complicated than that. Opportunities slip through your fingers because you're either too busy working multiple jobs or simply don't have the money to take advantage of them. You can spend countless hours agonizing over budgets, trying to figure out what bills to pay and what to push off, only to realize you're barely staying afloat. You work incredibly hard, often for less pay than someone who has an easier, more comfortable job. It's frustrating because the very things that could help you get ahead, like education or training, are out of reach because they cost money or require you to work less, which you can't afford to do. It's a vicious cycle that keeps you trapped, and it's something that's hard to fully grasp unless you've lived it. Losing a pet when you have your whole adulthood only with them. Sexual, physical abuse and the PTSD that often comes with it. One thing I've only truly understood after experiencing it is the profound loneliness that can exist even when you're surrounded by people. It's not about physical solitude, but a deep, internal sense of isolation that makes you feel invisible. No matter how many people are around, you can be in a crowded room, yet feel completely disconnected, as if no one really sees or understands you. This kind of loneliness is hard to describe and even harder to escape from, leaving you feeling more alone than if you were by yourself. Men of Reddit, what is a 100% myth about men? Thinking someone is attractive is not the same as wanting to pursue a relationship with someone. You can change something about me that I don't want to. One of the biggest myths about men is that we're constantly thinking about sex. While it's true that it crosses our minds, people seriously underestimate how much we think about food. especially when it's something really delicious. Sometimes, the thought of a perfect meal can completely take over our minds, pushing everything else to the background. Whether it's planning out what to eat next or daydreaming about that one incredible dish, food often wins the mental battle. We're all car fanatics. I don't know a thing about cars. A common misconception is that if a guy gets a boner, it automatically means he's feeling horny. But that's not always the case. The body can sometimes react for no apparent reason, and it doesn't have to be tied to sexual arousal. Sometimes it's just random, like when you're nervous, or even when you least expect it, like in the middle of a boring meeting or just waking up in the morning. It's just one of those weird quirks of the male body. We're fine. It's frustrating when people say I'm babysitting my daughter when I'm spending time with her. I'm not a babysitter, I'm her father. Being a dad means being there for her, whether it's playing together, helping with homework, or just hanging out. It's not a temporary job or a favor. It's part of who I am and what I do. Fatherhood isn't something you clock in and out of. It's a full-time role, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The idea that men think about sex every 6 seconds is just ridiculous. I can guarantee that when I'm stuck in traffic, my thoughts aren't jumping from frustration to random sexual fantasies. It's more like, ugh, this traffic is awful. Are we ever going to move? What's causing the delay? The last thing on my mind is anything remotely sexual. Honestly, dealing with the stress of being late or trying to figure out if there's an accident up ahead takes up all my focus in those moments. There's a common myth that all men are into sports, but that's far from the truth. Not every guy enjoys watching or playing sports, and some of us just don't find it interesting at all. We might prefer other hobbies like reading, gaming, or spending time outdoors in non-competitive ways. Just because sports are popular doesn't mean every man is a fan. It's a stereotype that doesn't really hold up when you consider how diverse our interests can be. It's a myth that we all love our bodies and how we look. We also feel fat or ugly and inadequate compared to an unrealistic beauty standard. There's a widespread belief that men don't want or need compliments, that we never cry, and that we're expected to man up and just deal with tough situations. Another myth is that men always prefer to pursue rather than be pursued. The truth is, men crave the same emotional and mental stimulation that's often associated with women. We appreciate compliments, we feel the need to express our emotions, and sometimes we want to be the ones who are pursued. Society has ingrained these stereotypes that tell us we shouldn't want or need these things, but in reality, we do. We're just as human and complex as anyone else, and those needs and desires are very real. The idea that men are always ready for sex is a total myth. There are plenty of times when we're just not in the mood. Maybe we're tired, stressed out, or have other things on our minds. Even when we do want it, we still appreciate some build-up, something sexy and seductive to get us in the right mindset. It's not like you can just grab our junk and expect us to be instantly ready to go. Sure, sometimes that works, but not always. We need the right vibe and mood, just like anyone else. Take your time and make sure we feel part of it rather than just something to be used when wanted. Never show a man you are interested. He prefers to work for it. If I ever got the feeling a woman was not into me, I would immediately stop pursuing her. If I got mixed signals, I would always doubt myself and be conflicted and anxious about pursuing her. If she gave me clear green lights that she was interested, that was when I was most excited, enthusiastic, and happy. I am an adult. I don't want to play head games. I want an adult relationship. Edit. Yes, I agree that you don't want a woman who is too easy to get. There is fun in the chase, but she needs to give some actual indication that she is interested and wants you to pursue her, that she is interested in a relationship too. She can't give you the cold shoulder or blow you off and reasonably expect you to keep going after her. It's a common myth that men don't experience violence from women, but that's simply not true. Men can and do suffer from domestic violence, emotional abuse, and even physical harm at the hands of women. Unfortunately, society often overlooks or downplays these experiences because of stereotypes that men should be tough or that women aren't capable of such behavior. This stigma can make it even harder for men to speak out or seek help. Violence isn't limited by gender, and it's important to recognize that anyone can be a victim, regardless of whether they're male or female. The idea that men can't have platonic female friends because we supposedly want to have sex with every woman we meet is completely off base. In reality, we're fully capable of forming deep, meaningful friendships with women without any sexual intentions. Friendship isn't always driven by attraction. Sometimes it's about shared interests, mutual respect, and genuine connection. Sure, attraction can exist, but it doesn't define every interaction. It's entirely possible to appreciate a woman's company and value her as a friend without any romantic or sexual undertones. Sometimes the woman is the abusive one, and that's valid. The belief that men suppress emotions because men aren't supposed to be vulnerable misses the mark. More often than not, the reason we hold back is that we've been hurt in the past after opening up. Maybe we trusted someone with our feelings, and they used it against us, leaving us feeling exposed and betrayed. It's not that we don't want to be vulnerable, it's just that the experience of having that vulnerability turned into a weapon makes us more guarded. We're not emotionless. We just learn to protect ourselves from getting hurt again. That they always want to be the big spoon. Turning down sex doesn't automatically mean a guy is gay. It's frustrating how often this assumption gets thrown around. Just because I didn't want to have sex at a particular moment doesn't mean I'm not attracted to women. I've had multiple girlfriends, and even my ex-wife accused me of being gay just because I wasn't in the mood when they were. There are plenty of reasons a man might not want to have sex at a given time. Maybe he's tired, stressed, or just not feeling it. It doesn't have anything to do with sexual orientation, like, where the fuck does that behavior come from? I just worked 14 hours, I want to eat and go to bed. The idea that men are instantly ready for sex the moment our pants come off is a myth. Just like anyone else, we appreciate and enjoy foreplay. It's not just about getting straight to the act. The build-up, the teasing, and the connection are all important too. We're not always immediately aroused. Sometimes it takes a bit more to get in the mood. Foreplay isn't just something we do for our partner's sake. It's something we genuinely enjoy and need to fully get into the moment. Edit. A lot of speak for yourself comments. Maybe I am just desensitized or part of being 33. It's a common misconception that if a man says hello, smiles, or strikes up a conversation, he's automatically flirting or trying to get with someone. Sometimes we're just being friendly or polite, the same way we would be with anyone else, regardless of gender. Whether we're standing in line, sitting next to each other at a bar, or just passing by, a simple comment or casual conversation doesn't always have a hidden agenda. Not every interaction is driven by attraction. Sometimes it's just about being social or acknowledging someone's presence in a shared space. Erections are not consent. The stereotype that men share every detail of their sexual experiences with friends is far from the truth. In my friend group, we might casually acknowledge that something happened, but that's usually where it ends. We don't dive into explicit details unless something truly unusual or noteworthy occurred. On the other hand, it's not uncommon to hear that women often share much more with their friends, discussing every aspect of a partner's performance in bed. The idea that men are the ones who overshare is just another myth that doesn't hold up in reality. All men are the same. The stereotype that men are always the messy ones in a relationship isn't true for everyone. In my case, it's actually the opposite. My wife is the creative one, and with that creativity comes a certain level of chaos. I'm the one who ends up picking up after her, organizing things and making sure the house stays tidy. It's not about gender. It's just that everyone has different habits and ways of living. The idea that men are inherently messier is just another overgeneralization that doesn't reflect the reality for many couples. The idea that men are only interested in sex is vastly overstated. It's not 100%, but many of us are looking for much more. Men want connection, love, and a deep relationship with a partner. Unfortunately, societal views on masculinity often portray these desires as weaknesses, leading some men to hide their true feelings or put on a front. But the truth is, we crave emotional intimacy and a meaningful bond just as much as anyone else. It's time to move past these outdated stereotypes and recognize that men are complex individuals with deep emotional needs. There's nothing romantic when we ask for a hug. It's a fucking hug. I like hugs. Hug me, please. That we're all sex-crazed and will fuck anything. We actually have the ability to turn down sex from someone who we otherwise find physically attractive. Either because we're tired, nervous, have other commitments, just not feeling it, or what have you. The idea that men won't talk about their feelings isn't universally true. Some of us do open up and share what's on our minds, and we're also here to listen to your feelings as well. It's not that we're incapable of expressing emotions. It's just that the stereotype has made it seem like we're less likely to do so. But when trust and comfort are there, many men are more than willing to have those deep, meaningful conversations. We care, we listen, and we're not afraid to talk about what really matters. That we control what we do in your dreams, so stop getting mad at us for it. Believe it or not all men are turned on by every unusual or quirky thing you might do. Slapping boiled cabbage across your chest while making full eye contact and singing show tunes might be entertaining, but it's definitely not a universal turn-on. Everyone has their own unique preferences, and what works for one person might not work for another. The idea that men are turned on by anything and everything is just another myth that doesn't hold up in reality. We're all different, and what excites one person might leave another completely puzzled. Well, the notion that men are always ready for sex is simply not true. If a man turns down an offer of sex, it doesn't automatically mean he's gay, impotent, or finds you unattractive. There are countless reasons why a man might not be in the mood, and it's important to remember that he doesn't owe any more of an explanation than a woman would if she declines. Just like anyone else, men have the right to say no without needing to justify their decision beyond that. I've never felt the urge to trespass onto someone's property just because they have milkshakes. The idea that men are irresistibly drawn to something like that, to the point of breaking boundaries, is absurd. It's a funny concept, but in reality, most of us have more self-control and respect for others' space than that. Milkshakes, or anything else for that matter, aren't going to make us lose our sense of decency. Edit. Cold ones are better than yours. I don't think about the Roman Empire very often at all. The stereotype that men are always talking about sex doesn't really apply to everyone. In my friend group, we rarely make sexual innuendos or discuss that kind of stuff. On the other hand, my female co-workers seem to talk about it all the time. It's a funny flip of the usual trope that men are the ones who can't stop talking about sex. I don't mind it at all. It doesn't make me uncomfortable or anything. It's just interesting to see how different the reality can be compared to the stereotype. The assumption that all men are naturally good at DIY projects is just a myth. Not every guy knows how to fix a leaky faucet, build furniture, or handle home repairs. Some of us might not have the skills, the tools, or even the interest in doing it ourselves. Just because society often paints men as handy with tools doesn't mean we all fit that mold. Sometimes we'd rather call a professional or simply don't have the knack for it. And that's perfectly okay. Sometimes it might seem like we're uncaring or distant, but the truth is, We just need some me time to decompress. It's not about ignoring others or being indifferent. It's about recharging and finding a bit of peace after a long day. Everyone has their own way of unwinding, and for many of us, that means taking a little time alone to clear our heads and relax. It doesn't mean we don't care. It's just how we take care of ourselves so we can be there for others when it matters. We're horny all the time, not all of us. The idea that men don't cook or do housework is outdated and wrong. After a long day at work, I come home and cook dinner for my family every night. It's not just about providing a meal, it's about taking care of my loved ones and being an active part of the household. Cooking, cleaning, and helping around the house aren't just women's work. They're responsibilities that everyone should share. For many of us, it's a point of pride to contribute in these ways and make sure our families are well taken care of. The idea that men prefer women who play hard to get over being straightforward is a misconception. In reality, many of us appreciate honesty and clear communication much more than games. It's refreshing when someone is upfront about their feelings, and it helps build trust right from the start. Playing hard to get can be confusing and frustrating, leading to mixed signals and doubt. Most of us would rather know where we stand and build a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding than try to decode someone's intentions. We all love big boobs. I once found myself in a chat room where a woman confidently declared that men think about sex every 6 seconds. I responded with a simple "no, we don't," but she had the audacity to insist, "Yes, you do," as if she was an expert on the inner workings of every man's mind. It was frustrating, to say the least, being told what I supposedly think by someone who seemed convinced they knew better. This stereotype is not only inaccurate, but also ignores the fact that men, like anyone else, have a wide range of thoughts and interests beyond just sex. It really frustrates me when people assume that men would be worse parents than mothers, or that we're somehow less capable of taking care of a home. The idea that men are just overgrown children, sloppy and lacking any domestic instincts, is incredibly unfair. It paints us as if all we want to do is lounge around, play games, and avoid responsibilities like parenting and housework. Yes, there are men who fit that stereotype, but they're a tiny minority. Just like there are women who aren't great at those things either. The majority of us take our roles as fathers and homemakers seriously, and we're just as committed to our families and homes as anyone else. That men can't be raped. The idea that men are universally attracted to fake eyebrows, long fake fingernails, and hair extensions is a misconception. While some men might appreciate certain styles, many of us actually prefer a more natural look. What really matters isn't the makeup or the extensions, it's the person underneath. Genuine confidence, a warm smile, and a real connection are far more attractive than any amount of cosmetic enhancements. Everyone has different tastes, but assuming all men are drawn to these artificial features overlooks the fact that beauty is more than skin deep. The rumor that men have a special third nipple that produces honey is utterly absurd and clearly a bizarre attempt to make us seem like freaks. Let's clear this up once and for all. It only produces wax. Kidding aside, these kinds of wild myths are just another example of how ridiculous stereotypes can get. It's all nonsense, but it does make you wonder where people come up with these things. The belief that men don't like cuddling is just plain wrong. Many of us enjoy cuddling just as much as anyone else. It's a comforting and intimate way to connect with someone we care about. The idea that men should always be tough and distant is outdated. We appreciate the warmth and closeness that comes with cuddling, whether it's after a long day or just while watching a movie together. It's one of those simple pleasures that can make us feel secure and loved. Men are pigs. I'm clearly a human like every other dude out there. The idea that a man cannot be forced into sex by a woman is a harmful and false stereotype. I've personally experienced being forced or bullied into sex since I was a teenager, and it's something I rarely talk about because of how people react. As a big black guy, I've heard things like, "But you're huge," or "How did she force you? She's only 100 pounds." These comments completely dismiss the emotional and psychological pressure that can be involved. It's not just about physical size or strength. There are many ways someone can be coerced or manipulated into a situation they don't want. Sadly, when I've tried to share my experience, I've often faced harsh criticism, especially from women. So I usually keep it to myself. It's a tough and lonely reality that more people need to understand. That we're all competitive. I don't give two shits about who makes more than me, who has a bigger dick, who wins at pool, who can dunk better, etc. It's boring to me. All are assholes. No, just no!